disk-shaped face, the flash of a white wing, and then nothing. If you didn't actually see it, it would be hard to even know that this bird had even passed you by. Such is the stealthy and silent nature of its flight. But if you did catch a glimpse of it, just out the corner of your eye, you'd be forgiven for thinking that you'd just seen a wraith or a ghostly shape of some kind glide by. Okay, I'm sure you've all got a pretty good idea of the bird I'm talking about. The barn owl, or to give it its Latin scientific name, Tyto alba, which literally means white owl, is one of over 200 species of owl that live on the planet today. All owls are birds of prey, or raptors, that prefer to hunt in low light using their excellent vision, hearing, and ability to fly silently to ambush their prey. The barn owl is possibly the most recognizable of them all because, well, they have an appearance that is just mesmerizing. Their distinct white disc-shaped face, dark eyes, and pale feathers almost make them seem like an alien creature from another world. Added to that, the way they sound isn't exactly the most comforting or soft hooting we normally imagine when we think of owls. Instead, what does come out is an eerie screeching call. It's because of this, and the fact that they tend to appear at night, that barn owls have been associated with folklore and superstition. In Spain, it was thought that barn owls were evil spirits who drank the oil from church lamps, leaving the poor saints in the dark. In Mexico, the birds have been seen as unlucky, omens of darkness and magic. And in Britain, where barn owls nest near countryside graveyards, they're believed to be a signal that death is soon approaching. With all that said, there are barn owl species all over the world. They can be found on every continent except for Antarctica. In Britain, we're used to seeing them with pale brown backs and wings with white undersides. Some scientists believe that these white bellies evolved to reflect the moonlight. Like a rabbit in the headlights, the theory is that this brief flash of reflected moonlight, at the very last second, startles their prey into momentary paralysis. It sounds really cool, but it's still a subject of debate, especially since barn owls around the world vary in colour. There's even one type with belly feathers that are more reddish in appearance. Barn owls thrive in large open areas like grasslands, marshes, and farmed fields. They're particularly drawn to rough patches of grass, where their prey of small mammals like to live. These birds have adapted to their surroundings to become incredible hunters, and this becomes all the more clear once we take a closer look at some of their features. To start with, a barn owl's hearing is the most sensitive of any animal ever tested. Their heart-shaped facial disc funnels sound into their inner ears, a bit like how the structure of our outer ears help us pinpoint and pick up sound. But whereas our ears line up either side symmetrically, their ears are shaped differently and placed asymmetrically so that one is higher than the other. Because of this, the sounds reaching each of the ears are heard from different perspectives. The owl essentially hears the world in stereo, and this stereoscopic sense of hearing helps our bird of prey to better pinpoint the exact location of its prey. Now, when it comes to the type of sounds they can pick up, they're particularly good at detecting the high-frequency calls coming from something like a field vole rustling in the grass. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean they don't have good eyesight, because they do. Their eyes are excellent at detecting motion in low light. Unlike most birds, barn owl eyes are placed in a frontal position, which helps them estimate distances really well. This is known as depth perception. One weird quirk of barn owl eyes comes down to the fact that they have really big corneas and lenses. As a result, and you guys will love this fact, Their eyeballs aren't spherical like ours, but instead they're shaped like a tube, kind of like a sausage. Can you imagine? Owl eyeball sausages. All of this means that they can't move their eyeballs within their sockets. So they're bound to physically moving their heads so that the thing they want to look at is directly in front of them. As a result, and owls are famous for this, they've evolved the ability to rotate and move their heads 270 degrees. Handy when it comes to spotting your next meal. Even their legs and talons have adapted to becoming better hunting tools. They're remarkably long and sharp, excellent for picking up rodents out of deep vegetation. And to cap it all off, their silent, steady flight makes them the perfect stealth predator. Barn owls can fly slowly and hover quietly above their prey, hardly flapping their wings as they do so. Not only does this make it hard for an incoming owl to be heard by their next potential meal, it also means that the little sounds made by their prey, which the owl is listening out for, aren't masked by the flapping sound of their own wings. Even in windy, gusty conditions, they can maintain their hovering position effortlessly. It's quite something to see. And it's this steady flight that's caught the eye of a team of engineers and naturalists in the UK who are looking for ways of keeping small aircraft, like drones, stable in stormy conditions. Hello, I'm Patrick Ie, and this is Season 2 of 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter, an original podcast from the BBC World Service, which explores how animals have helped us to solve human problems and inspired some amazing inventions along the way. If you've enjoyed our podcast, please spread the word and share it with everyone you know. Go on, I know that you know that they'll absolutely love it. Now, if they're new to podcasts, show them how to find a podcast app and search for this show. But don't stop there. While you're at it, show them how to subscribe. It's quick, easy, and it means you'll get all the episodes automatically. If you're feeling generous, please do leave us a comment or even suggestions for other inspiring creatures of the wild. The hashtag on social media is 30animals. So, how do barn owls fly so steadily and silently? It all comes down to the evolutionary design of their wings and feathers. If you've ever been lucky enough to touch a barn owl, you'll know that its feathers are extremely soft. And when you look at them up close, you can see why. Most birds have straight edges to their feathers, and this is one of the reasons why you can hear them when they flap their wings. But the barn owl has an additional feature to one of its primary feathers. These are the main flight feathers on the outer edge of the bird's wingtip. On the barn owl's foremost primary feather, there's a soft comb-like fringe. This has the effect of dampening the sound of the wing and kind of acts like a silencer. And it's this that gives them the ability to sneak up on their prey so silently. The barn owl's other feathers are covered in a layer of tiny hair-like structures that trap air within the feather's surface. This helps maintain a smooth airflow across each of the wings and prevents the bird from stalling. In other words, from falling out of the sky when it's flying really slowly. Now, for all their grace and magnificence, there is one disadvantage to these well-adapted feathers. When it comes to being waterproof, they're not exactly prime material. Unlike how water runs off a duck's back, owl feathers get super clogged when they get wet, and they make more sound and become less efficient. And it's for this reason that barn owls prefer to avoid hunting in the rain, which means that they sometimes have to go hungry for much longer periods of time than they'd like, particularly if there's a bad run of weather. But in dry conditions, they've certainly earned their place as one of nature's masters of the sky. But it's not just specially adapted feathers that help the barn owl to fly so well. Their body structure also contributes to super smooth flight. Barn owls have a wingspan that stretches for over a meter and a lightweight body which helps them when it comes to hanging motionless in the sky for those vital seconds they need to pinpoint their prey. And there's one more trick to the wings that helps owls maintain steady flight. And it's something that a team of biologists and engineers in the UK have been examining very closely. But before I tell you about that, let's turn our attention to something else that you might have seen in the sky. Something far less fluffy and definitely much noisier. Drones. To me, these unmanned remote-controlled flying robots are perfect examples of some of today's coolest tech. So it may surprise you to hear that they've actually been around for over 100 years. The earliest recorded use of unmanned flying vehicles, also known as unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs, dates back to July 1849. Austrian forces on board the military ship, the SMS Volcano, launched nearly 200 hot air balloon bombs as they attacked the city of Venice, whose people had declared independence from the Austrian Empire. This would go down in the history books as the very first air-based offensive in naval aviation. Now, although at least one bomb did hit the city as planned, changing winds meant that most of the balloons missed their target. Some even drifted back over Austrian lines. If these UAVs were going to take off, then operators needed a better way of controlling them. During the First World War, engineers experimented with different ways of creating UAVs that could be used to attack the enemy. One of the earliest came in the form of a British monoplane designed by one of the great pioneers of aviation, Geoffrey de Havilland, which was controlled by a radio system from the ground. These designs weren't perfected in time to be used in combat, but fast forward decades later to the Vietnam War of the 1960s, and the US Army had developed drones called lightning bugs to gather intelligence, launch missiles, and even drop propaganda leaflets. Since then, drones have become far more sophisticated and have a wide range of non-military tasks, from collecting weather data, filming, and even delivering goods. They're really useful when it comes to performing jobs that are too dangerous for human-piloted aircraft. One of the coolest examples has to be using drones to fly deep inside volcanic gas plumes to take measurements and find out exactly what's going on within this caustic cloud. Now, you're probably aware of some of the different types of drones out there. Some have rotor blades like mini helicopters, and others have fixed wings like aeroplanes. Well, these fixed wing drones have been running up against a bit of a problem: turbulence. Some of you may have experienced turbulence on a plane as it's flown through unsteady, irregular moving air. It can be a very scary experience. I've had a few white knuckle rides myself. It literally felt like I was on a roller coaster. And that was on an airliner. The smaller the aircraft, or in this case, drone, the easier it is to be knocked around. And that's why experts from the Royal Veterinary College and engineers from the Department of Aerospace Engineering at the University of Bristol in the UK decided to team up to see whether birds might offer a solution to stabilizing drones and small aircraft, helping them to better cope with turbulence and sudden gusts of wind. They started out by working with and studying a few birds, including a tawny eagle, a hawk, a raven, and a barn owl. But the latter was no ordinary barn owl. Oh no. Lily, as she goes by, had already starred in many BBC natural history films. So perhaps it was no surprise that it was her performance and consistent flight that impressed the team the most. To study the birds, the team constructed a 14-meter-long corridor. The idea was that in this space, the birds would have enough room to flap their wings and build up enough speed before settling in to a smooth glide. As they glided, fans would blow air through a funnel, creating strong gusts of wind that would force the birds upwards. At the same time, whilst these fans were in action, a group of 10 high-speed photo and video cameras recording at 1,000 frames a second were set up to capture the moment, the split second in which the gust hit the bird. This gave them the ability to watch back and see exactly how the bird responded. When Lily flew through this corridor, the team saw something that took them by surprise. Even before they'd analysed her flight, they could see that her body and head remained perfectly and exquisitely stable, despite the strong upward gusts of air. When they studied the images, it became clear why. The moment that the gusts of air struck Lily's body, her wings immediately pivoted upwards around her shoulder joints. It wasn't that Lily was consciously flapping or moving her wings. It was more of a reaction that happened without her having to control it. This was a purely mechanical response that biologists call a preflex, a type of reflex that bypasses the nervous system altogether and instead uses the elastic properties of a muscle to respond to an action really quickly. And that is when the team came up with an ingenious insight. They wondered if what Lily's wings were doing was similar to what happens when you hit a ball with that perfect shot. I'm talking sports like baseball, cricket, tennis. If you've ever had a game with some friends, or maybe you're a pro player listening to this right now, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. That incredible moment when a bat and ball connect in a way that the connection is so effortless you hardly even feel it. Yet the ball bounces back with phenomenal speed. You've stumbled on a magic sweet spot. In engineering, this sweet spot is called the center of percussion, and it can be found on a number of objects that pivot on hinges. The team found some truly remarkable evidence that the upward gusts of air were hitting Lily's wings at their center of percussion, which in turn stimulated the preflex response, making Lily's wings rotate upwards without disturbing her body. In this way, she was able to absorb the effects of the gust without being bumped around by it. And that's how her head and body could stay so still. All of this happened on the fly and unconsciously. But the key point here is that this preflex gave Lily's central nervous system a few extra moments to detect what's happening, catch up, and then activate her muscles in the right way such that she could maintain control of her flight. Having discovered this, the team are now exploring the different ways in which Lily's preflex response might be transferred to aircraft design. Perhaps in the future, drones and small aircraft might have some kind of hinged arrangement or setup right at the point where the wing meets the fuselage, allowing it to better respond to gusts and turbulence. This could have a dramatic effect on what drones and small aircraft can deal with, making them far better at handling strong winds. And maybe one day, you might even see hinges like this on bigger aircraft, helping give you and I a smoother, more comfortable ride. All of this inspired by the steady flight of a silent, ghostly predator. Head on over to the BBC World Service website now for more information on this episode. You can find it at bbcworldservice.com/30animals. And in the next episode of 30 Animals That Made Us Smarter, Arapaima and Armour, we'll hear how the scales of a remarkable Amazonian fish are inspiring a new, tough, but flexible type of armour. Don't forget to spread the word. It's #30animals.